Bigger is better. Today, it's a phrase which resonates through the personalities of millions across the globe. The idea that having more stuff and doing more things equates to happiness and a sense of importance has been knitted throughout the fabric of most countries and cultures. However, minimalist writer Leo Babauta says, materialism has become a disease which is spreading beyond our control. There is such a widespread lack of contentment that the most common phrase we hear when conversing with others is, "I wish I had this," or "My life would be so much better if I could afford that." Even our well-to-do acquaintances, who making between 60 to 100 OK a year, are suffering from this common cold. Philosophy of simpler living says, material possessions blind us in a sense. When we put all of our focus on the things we have and the things we want, we lose sight of more important matters, like our relationships, our well-being, and even our personal health. You might have noticed those people who give too much importance to material possessions, their sense of self-worth relied solely on the things they owned. They would even subconsciously look down on others who didn't have as much as they did, and eventually became surrounded by people who cared only about the things they had, rather than the type of person they were. However, those same people will turn a blind eye to you if you lose your material possessions, and all of those friendships you had developed will vaporize in a matter of weeks. Having more stuff eats away our time and money. Minimalist writer Raymond Carver says, "The most exemplary situation I remember was in high school when my dad bought a hot tub. It was one of those purchases that the whole family agreed would shed off a few coats of stress, especially for my mom, because she would often work long hours. The thought of relaxing in a big, jet-lined tub after work and school was just too appealing. So he made the investment." Carver says, "We loved it for the first couple weeks, but then the electric bill came. An extra $75 a month just to run the thing. A couple months down the pump went out, which cost another $200, and a mountain of stress. Eventually, Mom looked at Dad and asked, 'Is this really worth it?' And they sold it a week later and emphasized how glad they were that the money eater was gone." Wisdom of Minimalism says, we see this happening to people on a daily basis. New cars every year, upgraded phones every couple of months, piles of clothes stuffed into huge closets. There is nothing inherently wrong with having nice things, but it is the mindset of consumption and excess which essentially throws people overboard. They begin to drown because their possessions become tied around their ankles. Due to a lack of contentment, they become slaves to their material desires. Put effort to downsize, getting rid of unessential things, and adhering to a simpler means of living. Once you will switch to minimalism, you will find your mornings are brighter. Your attitude have made a complete 180, and your outlook on life is much more positive. We see people struggling to retain a smile just because they don't have the stuff they want, or in some cases, killing themselves daily because they have too much stuff. It blindly robs them of their joy, free time, and hard-earned cash. Writer of the book, Less is More, Jason Hickel says, "I want to teach people how to live like a king with the things they already own." According to Hickel, living a life of minimalism doesn't mean compromising your comforts and sacrificing your luxuries. Being frugal doesn't have to equate to a boring, monochromatic lifestyle. When it comes to simple living, Getting rid of unnecessary things is the most integral step, but it also seems to be the most difficult for some people. First, successfully reduce your possessions by half in just a matter of days. Here is a step-by-step guide to follow so you can do the same. Cultivate your minimalist mindset. Before you begin pulling things off of your shelf, you need to first establish a mentality which pertains to necessity and organization. Then, remind yourself of the reasons you are doing this in the first place, like want to have more free time, want to save money, and want to live as stress-free as possible. And keep these things lodged deep within your brain for motivation, because it is super easy to just say, screw it, and keep living the same way you are now. Work systematically. The first plan of action you have is to go through your apartment room by room. This is a much easier approach than bouncing back and forth between the bedroom, the living room, the kitchen, etc. Simultaneously, you must limit yourself to one room at a time. It allows you to completely downsize a huge percentage of your living space at once without having to go back to it later. Break up each room into individual sections and focus your attention on one section at a time until you have completed. Most of us are extremely hesitant when it came to getting rid of most of our things. For this, you must ask, is this useful or simply unnecessary clutter? Ask yourself these 3 questions. Have I used this item at least once in the past 2 months? Does this item serve a purpose other than filling space? Is this item benefiting me in any way? If you answered yes to at least 2 of the questions, then the item would be spared. If no is the majority answer, then the item must be discarded. This way, you'll quickly come to realize how freeing it is to have less stuff crowding your house. Compulsive spending. This is a huge problem for today's society. Majority of the things we're trying to get rid of are a result of compulsive spending. Nevertheless, with a little bit of practice and understanding, it is very easy to avoid purchasing unnecessary things. There are the records of the philosophical societies that says, when it comes to bigger purchases, think thrice before buying. This way, you will find that an item's value depreciates greatly each successive time you consider purchasing it. So, for example, if you are at the store and you spot a nice sound system for your home theater, don't buy it that day. Just make a mental note of it. If you still find yourself desperately wanting it, come back to it a few days later and do the same thing. Don't purchase yet. The 3rd time you come back to the store, look at the item and ask yourself, has it lost any value to me? If the answer is yes, even by a small margin, don't make the purchase. Philosophy of frugality says, if an item depreciates before you even own it, it's going to exponentially lose its value to you after you decide to buy it. Avoid making trips to the mall, store, if you aren't initially planning on buying anything. This may seem obvious, but we actually used to enjoy going to different stores just to browse and people watch. Most of the time, we would buy something just because we felt obligated to. Philosophy of simpler living tells, avoid shopping with others. It is found that we are much more likely to buy something if we are with a friend or family member. Because whenever we considered purchasing something, we would ask our friend if they liked it. If we got a positive response, it would usually end up in our shopping cart. According to the philosophy of minimalism, it had to do with justification, in the sense that if someone else, other than us liked the thing we wanted, then it must be a good purchase. This just sparks a flame for a necessary desire that could have easily been avoided in the first place. Remember, living a life of frugality doesn't necessarily mean sacrificing your comforts and giving up your luxuries. You can live like a king while simultaneously saving money. First of all, it is important to define the concept of luxury. Simplicity says luxury doesn't lie in diamond-stitched car interiors and $15,000 Rolexes. Henry David Thoreau saw luxury as having time, freedom, and financial security. Thoreau says, "I can feel like a king because I choose to live frugally enough to avoid financial burdens and have plenty of time to myself." Frugality does not equate to being cheap. In fact, the opposite is true. See, even though frugal people don't have many possessions, they choose to invest in quality items rather than cheap knockoffs that will obliterate in a few months' time. Frugality is not about penny pinching. It's about wise investments. Finally, be content. Honestly, this is a practice that takes a lifetime to master. However, the more you practice contentment, the easier it becomes. It also renders happiness in the process and snuffs out that internal flame of material desire that seems to burn so brightly in the lives of others around us. Once you have less things, you will begin to value your free time over material desires. The only thing that seems to supersede free time is relationship and time spent with others. That's all for today's video. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more empowering content. And if our content has inspired you, consider supporting our channel by becoming a member or giving super. Your contributions enable us to keep delivering valuable and uplifting content. Thanks for watching.